Bitter is the cup that makes you thirst. You drink, and you drink, and it only gets worse. Greetings in yet another unscripted essay of mine. This time, the topic is Starstruck Hands of Time, a game by mrtenda, or this create-delic thin-jee he is probably involved with, or whatever. It's yet another pretty post-modern game. Well, from what I gather it to be at least. And I would love to yap about it for like another 40 minutes maybe 20. It's a much shorter game than Y2K, so I figure it would be a bit quicker to finish my speech regarding it. Mostly I just intend to provide my fucked up read on everything happening in the game. Though it doesn't mean I'm gonna recount this whole story, I think. Mostly, I guess you could say I just wanna tell the world about how I feel about being the same as Edwin, its protagonist. Edwin is a pretty mentally disturbed little guy. Well, not little, I guess he's like a teenager maybe. Edwin's into music, I suppose, but well, that's interesting. I never really bothered figuring it out, but Edwin is obsessed with what at least Edwin himself presumes to be his childhood friend, Dawn. Dawn is a singer, I guess. She sings most prominently, I guess, Break the Mould, a song written by her, but Edwin doesn't really agree with that. There's that scene when Edwin just starts to like completely lose his mind, or well, it's debatable whether his mind hasn't already been lost by the time you like start the game. But still. Right, Edwin loses his mind, and that's represented by the mold, I guess. And the mold is one interesting thing which I've been wrapping my head around for a while, but I think I might be ready this time. Basically I had a moderate breakdown a few days ago, and I arrived at some very interesting point regarding the mold and Edwin's desire to enter the center. No, to be at the center. Wow, just like Honest Man at the center. Could it be a Y2K reference? Oh my god. Anyway, not to derail. Back to Edwin and his desire to back to Edwin and his modern desire to be at the center. Modern as in rotten, you know. As a true German verb. Modern means to rot or something. Anyway, derailed once more. Edwin, right? Edwin and the mold. The mold, represented by Ouroboros. Well, at its earliest cutscene appearance, I suppose, is an Ouroboros. This Ouroboros tells Edwin that he can mold himself. What I think is interesting is that Edwin doesn't really mold himself. Like, instead, he kind of just hijacks the existent narrative, and in the existent narrative, like in reality, Dawn wrote Break the Mold. Well, that's debatable too, I suppose, but like, okay, for now, for the sake of argument, we say that Dawn wrote Break the Mold. Edwin. Whoa, that's such a genius scene that I would like to narrate it. Narrate its every nook and cranny, but like, Edwin with an axe-shaped guitar ends up reading a book. After the cutscene, when you interact with a book, it's like I think it said something like freshly. I'll actually pull up a screenshot. Let me do just that. I was amazed by this scene. And not to find it, you know. Where is it? It's more towards the end, probably. Or not really. Oh, is that it? No, it isn't. Just a second. Yeah, see, that's why people hate unscripted stuff like this, but I don't really care. I hate myself more than anyone. So... No, seriously, I can't find the screenshot in question. I'll check the other folder as well, but basically it said something like freshly cut wood or something, like described in the book. And since Edwin's guitar in the cutscene is like... It looks like an axe. It kind of figures, you know, that he cut out his own narrative out of one already present in the story. So Edwin molds reality to be like to be the way he prefers it to be. To mirror right a case question once more, but that's not what I intend to do. Just what Edwin dilutes, you could say, I guess. He takes credit for Dawn's work, and thinks Break the Mold is something he, in his childhood, kind of played, and there even memorized that. Well, I guess. But it ultimately went down as something created by Dawn. But that's just the way Edwin wants it to be. Edwin is wrong. Edwin is delusional. Now, what even is the mold? I think the mold is something different for Dawn, for one. Because her son... Break the Dawn. No, don't break the Dawn. Her son, Break the Mold, is... Well, let's look up the mold's definition, for one. Because I think that's interesting. And no, I don't like this one. Another definition. I need another definition. God damn it. Well, yeah, basically as a verb at least to shape something into a particular form. And I think that's interesting. Because, like... Yeah, and there's even one example I see, which I would love to discuss. Like, an exemplary sentence. Parents help mold a child's character. I think that's one of, like, key problems Dawn has. With her mother, for one, and kind of with her brother as well. Like, she's molded and she rebels against the way she's attempted by her mother to be molded, the way her mother wants to mold her, and the way her mother molded Wiikcord by exposing him to what Oswald's influence. No, Oswald is very complicated. I'll try to give a proper input regarding Oswald later, like in like 10 minutes maybe. I say like too much, too often. Anyway, Dawn breaks the mold, like her life, her own life. She doesn't really abide by the rules her mother postulates and such. She is attempting to lead her own life. I guess you could say she's the leader of her music band. Join my Emma band. Sorry. She's the leader of her music band and she sings what she sings and such. And like, it seems not to be endorsed by, well, authority, if you consider her to be an authority in like that city. What's the town called actually? I don't remember. Did the town and Starstruck even have a name? Oh well. Guess I'm getting rusty. Anyway. And yeah, in Dawn's case, Mould is something to break. Because the way she's formed is not the way she'd like to be formed. Oh, well, she's not formed that way, not shaped. But like, let's say, external factors such as brother, mother, and so on attempt to mold her that way. But it's not working. Well, it briefly does work, you could say, when she's revealed that her own skills, or when she's like, when she remembers that her own music skills came from interactions with Oswald as well. God, Oswald is so complicated. Anyway, yeah, and she briefly says one interesting thing. I think I should be able to find wisdom at least. She says like, she's not even the real person, I trust. I'll pull it up real quick. As usual. Takes a while, but whatever. Yeah, there it is. Lucy, I need to tell you something. My songs, our band's songs, Break the Mold, all of our songs. I didn't really write them. I got all of them from... I don't know really, but they're not mine. A long time ago, someone planted something deep inside me. Something I don't understand. That's where I got all my songs. I'm a fraud, a pathetic fraud. Everything was a lie. I'm not even a real person. But like, she's so wrong. I guess it sort of reflects or mirrors. You could say it mirrors art in nature. Like, one could argue, well, my friend Redmond said it about postmodernism, which I kind of, agree to disagree. That postmodernism could be argued to be inherently, inherently unoriginal. I don't really agree with that. Not like, no, I do. But that's because everything is almost inherently unoriginal. It was during one argument we had. Well, whatever. It doesn't matter right now. Yeah, so... I'd say art could be argued to be unoriginal, but what is originality in the first place? Again, something unique? Well, how can you tell if something is unique in the first place? I don't think you really can. Like, art mirrors universe, I'd say. The universe, everything, life, maybe? And that's not bad. You don't need to think it's bad. Like, well, in Dawn's case, it's pretty odd. I need to think more about that. Like... Oh, well, actually, no. I could think a little bit simpler about that. Like, you could say Dawn recalls precisely how she was molded. Well, let's say for now that she's exposed in her early age to Oswald's influence. Oswald is rather famous in the world of Starstruck. He's a composer, though Hadley, computer assistant, tells you, the captain, that Oswald is basically a big plagiarizing man. Like, he passed Wagner's, I think, Richard Wagner's music as his own. But even so, and I think that's... You could read this message, like, very differently. But I think in this particular case, for yourself, you need to read it like not something bad necessarily, despite Oswald's role being pretty bad indeed in the story. from what I figure at the very least. But the fact that he's famous and that he got a statue, a monument set up for him in Starstruck town. No, actually, I think it was called something relating to serpents, maybe, which checks out of Ouroboros theme. I mean, the Starstruck town name. Whatever. Yeah, but the fact that Oswald remains glorified, well, not glorified, but he remains remembered, as opposed to, like, real history, well, or history narrated by Hadley. Oswald's music ultimately lost its charm. Well, because it's plagiarized, and like, do I even say it correctly? Pronounce it correctly? Whatever. Yeah, because it's Wagner's music and all. Then Oswald just kind of gets lost, and is never brought up in history. Also, Hadley says that there's so many interesting parallels, like Oswald passing Wagner's music as his own, parallels Wagner passing his own music. Well, no, not his own music. By the way, I tried to check this out. I don't think it really correlates with real life history, so don't mind it too much, but Hadley recounts to the captain that Wagner's opera, Rienzi, I think it was, the one which inspired, well, we all know this dude, greatly inspired Adolf Hitler, the German dictator. Yeah, I lost the beginning of my sentence, I think. Anyway, that opera inspired Adolf Hitler, and that opera itself was a ripoff, you could say. A ripoff of another composer, like Giacomo Meyerbeer, who was Jewish, basically, yes. He was an early supporter of Richard Wagner, enabling the first production of Latter's opera Rienzi. I like that. Well, in game it's like plagiarizing, I think, directly. Made out to be that way. And like, that's one big parallel. Like, Meyerbeer to Wagner to Oswald to Don or Edwin. No and yes, respectively. Why do I think that? Why do I think that's the case? Because despite Dawn having been formed, shaped, molded by her mother exposing her to famous plagiarizer Oswald's influence from early age, well, she quite literally follows the message. And it doesn't really matter who planted that message in her, because she provides her own interpretation of that still. That interpretation being to break the mold. And like, she briefly becomes a molded statue, I guess. But she's brought back to her senses by Lucy, and Lucy breaks the mold as well. Lucy is molded by her parents, her mother, to be a good girl, and she gets rid of that at the very end of the game. And Dawn arrives at that a bit sooner, thanks to Lucy again. So Dawn's back to normal, and it doesn't really seem to trouble her anymore, but like, she's troubled indeed, as pointed out by Zach at the end of the game. Zach is most normal in the whole game. I love Zach. Anyway, as opposed to Dawn, mainly, the obsessor over Dawn. Edwin does the exact opposite. It's worth noting that you could argue that Edwin isn't really molded properly. Like, his parents only watch TV so far, and that's further hyperbolized by, like, them watching TV as molded figures, molded monuments at the moon section at the very end of the game. And that's after Edwin accomplishes his goal of entering the center, or so he figures. So, like, it just goes to show how much of a problem that is. But instead, I guess Edwin finds a very twisted way to mold himself. Starstruck is a cycle, a loop, an Ouroboros. Pointed out by cars running around in circles. By the mailman walking around in circles. By the train going around in circles around the entire town, and many other things. The fact that the game basically, well, does it really restart at the end? I couldn't really tell, but like, it sort of does. Yeah, I guess you could say it does. Right, because I think Oswald's statue is back at the end of the game. Anyway, so based on his observations of that omnipresent Ouroboros, Edwin's mind kind of works out something interesting. Like, you could say it's solipsistic as well, I guess. He works out that well, back to that scene where he hijacks the narrative to make himself at least think that he wrote Break the Mold. Edwin finds a way to mold himself in that Ouroboros, quite literally. It's literally the cutscene. Well, but I just described how he could have thought of that in the first place. Yeah, also Oswald, being a plagiarizer and all. I think that exposes to Edwin the wrong interpretation of reality, basically. That reality is inherently unoriginal and is just something that loops back. Well, you know what we say, history repeats itself and such. Edwin takes that too close to his heart and goes along that, sings along the tune, I suppose, throughout the entire story. He describes Break the Mold to himself as his creation. Then he also quite literally becomes Dawn. But to become Dawn, well, put yourself in Edwin's shoes for a change. If you were to become someone else, what would that mean? That would mean, quite literally, egocide, so you kill yourself. And I think that's represented just wonderfully by how Edwin's trapped in that gigantic molded Dawn at the very end of the game. Like, she opens up, quite literally, and devours him, you could say. Devours, like, well. And it's interesting that it's like, she's that Iron Maiden thin-jee, basically. There are spikes and needles, and Edwin enters the Iron Maiden, basically. So I think that represents that by accomplishing his ideal of becoming someone else. So therefore, not being himself anymore, sacrificing his own self. I think that's represented wonderfully by that Iron Maiden. Just, well, you ever been to the Iron Maiden? I wouldn't want to be inside one. But yeah, you could think that he's torn to shreds there, his self. And he's Dawn, but he's molded. And the mold ultimately represents just that. But you are, well, for Edwin, you are someone else. You are even gigantic, as the dawn that he becomes is. And that's it. You yourself are torn to shreds, you are someone else. And you are molded. You are the mold. It's like Oswald's statue, basically. It's just a statue. Statues aren't alive, really. But they testify to something being remembered. But that's all they ever do, really. Well, they could inspire people, but that's it. They don't really pass their own memes. They don't do anything. Is that really what Edwin wants to become? I don't think that's it. That's not entering the center at all. And that's why, like, it's pretty stupid. He praises the mold because he figures out his own way of molding himself, shaping himself. It's a flawed way. It's kind of pro-plagiarizing way and such. It's self-destructive as well. And Dawn proposes an alternative. I like that alternative, to break the mold. But what's most depressing for me is that it ultimately comes back to the same outset. Edwin's back, Oswald's statue is there, and their town remains in Ouroboros. So, like, that's if you pick the good ending, of course. Or, well, I think it's good. Like, if you don't follow along inside the mold's voice at the very end of the game. But if you choose to... Yeah, and that's interesting too, like, if you choose to still help Edwin, or if you lead Edwin to the player's hand at the very end of the game, Edwin kinda hesitates, but in the end he agrees. I wanna kinda account for why he agrees in the first place. Because Edwin doesn't really fucking change at all. Edwin remains a freak. Edwin's fucked up, he's screwed up, he's cureless. He's a lost cause, you could say. Just like me. Anyway, Edwin does it because he knows it's better in the long run. If this time he kind of failed because Dawn not being him in the first place, persisted through and persisted to be, and broke his own mold. So Edwin agrees, because if he agrees, it all comes back to normal and he can just try again. It's not the same thing, of course, there is no New Game Plus like in Y2K. Or well, no New Game Plus, or at least I haven't seen one. But it's back to normal. And what's also noteworthy, I mean, is that the player is dead, I think. If you try to load your save file, it says that this user is dead. And you know who isn't dead? Edwin isn't. And you can just replay the game. Which is normal, it's a game, but it's very interesting to me. Because it kind of goes back to being normal, but in a way, does it really? And I think it doesn't, honestly, it just doesn't. Yeah, so Oswald is a perfect representation of that. It's a trinity. You could read Oswald as the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, all three at the same time. And he's the mold. The mold personified. To the point of being falsely worshipped by Dawn's family. And being the way her family is trying to mold her. Which goes against her own agenda, of course. So she breaks that mold. But Edwin is unmolded, so he just looks around and molds himself, precisely the same fucking bad way. But much like Lucy comes back to her senses, realizing she doesn't need to be a good girl, she has no need for that good girl part of herself, so she gets rid of it, even though very late into the game, but she still does. She breaks the mold, you could say. Lucy breaks the mold, Don breaks the mold. Zack is unaffected by the mold because he just does what he wants, I suppose. He lives without a care in the world. Like, he doesn't really get what's going on for, like, with most of the story. I think that's so funny. Adorable. Edwin doesn't deserve a friend like Zack, honestly. Anyway. But Edwin praises with mold because it's... you could say it's somewhat inclusive. Like, I don't think I can pronounce it right. I'll look it up explicitly. Yeah, inclusive, I think. So like, strictly speaking, anyone can try and enter the center, but the center is false. It's false because you can't really enter the center. You can't be at the center. The center is anything but you. You can praise it, but you'll never reach it. You can break it, but that'll be debatable. We could say it's delusional to break it, but it's still better for your health, I suppose. Sorry, that's a bit of a twisted read, but I see it that way. Like, the center is anything but you. And Edwin doesn't learn that at all. And it kind of works, I suppose, because the narrative is... well, the narrative is triple. It's Captain, Edwin, Don. But each of them... you could say each of those three, even you, the player, attempts to shift it like towards yourself, towards oneself. The player does it, well, you could say the player does it by just playing the game and making their own choices, well, when they can, like playing the music, playing Edwin's guitar, playing Don's guitar, and so on. And helping Edwin at the very end. Edwin does it by entering the whole center, or more so the hole he missed through the center. And Don thinks she's so cool and dumb for breaking the mold. I suppose you could say that. You didn't have to. You didn't have to at all. I'm like... she's kind of already at the center from Edwin's perspective. But also I'd say Dawn is healthily egoistic. Like, she's largely undisturbed at the start of the game and at the end of the game. In the middle, yes, she goes through some breaking points, but she endures. She endures them and emerges victorious, I suppose. But yeah, a normal center. But that's wrong, because like, we're still 3 stories unfolding, you could say. The captains, or the players, the Dons, just Dons, Dons and Edwin's stories unfolding. So there's no real center here. Or you could say that the center is the world. And the point is, you'll never be the world. Don will never be the world. And Edwin will never be the world. They can be themselves, and just as Don sings in Enter the Center, And you'll be your true... I'll be my true self soon, yeah. I'll be my true self soon, and you'll be yours too. And the world can do it too. And that kind of just loops, you know. The world can do it too. That implies that you can't be the world, because the world can be itself on its own just fine. It doesn't need you at all. Fuck off of the world, Edwin. Leave it alone, player. Leave it alone, Dawn. And while Dawn kind of leaves it alone, well, she never really interacts with it. She just exists normally, mostly. She's still troubled, but she exists normally, I guess. Well, every other character does that too. Edwin doesn't. Edwin wants to be at the center. He never will be at the center. Neither Nair, well, neither Edwin nor her player will ever be at the center. You could argue there is no center. No, but if there is one center in the story, it's the story itself, the world, Starstruck Hands of Time. And I think that sums it up, kind of. I'm not sure if I conveyed my points all that well, but I really wanted to yap about this game for so long. I've been wrapping my head about this whole Mould thing around Oswald. Well, I think I explained Oswald more or less. Like him being representative, key representative of the Mould. And such. And I think it kind of... Oh wow, just realized something. It really is kind of a trinity. Like, in this trinity you get to choose what you want to do. Well, you kind of do all three things at once. You break the mold as Dawn, you brace the mold as Edwin, and you are the mold as you, the player. And that's the reason why I will spell the mold in the title of this video as British MOULD, because you will be at the center that way. Because you've molded yourself that way. What have you done? Anyway, it was just a dramatic conclusion, sorry. I wonder if this was a bit less boring than my first video, Yapsay, about Y2K. I think it's a bit shorter, right? Yeah, it's a bit shorter. I'll have to find some footage, starstruck footage probably, for this video. And I think I'm just about done. Wow. Yeah, I think I have been able to express my mind somewhat clearer this time. I'm happy. I'm lying. I will never be happy. Well, with that, I bid you farewell, I suppose. Feel free to be, praise, or break the mold. Just know you are not the center. But, like, I think the idea of striving to enter the center doesn't have to be bad at all. Just don't be Edwin. Just don't be me. That's it, I suppose. Thanks for watching. I'll be going now. I'm not even a real person.